Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good.
Okay, great. I see 8 people on, including myself, and it's 11:30. Let's wait for a minute and we'll start, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. No problem.
All right, brother. I think it's 11:32 now. And assalamu alaikum, everyone. The format of the lecture is same. If you have any questions, please put on the chat window. Brother Dickinson will take those questions at the end of the lecture, inshallah. And at the end, I will, unmute everyone. So if you guys want to ask any question, you will be able to ask at that time, inshallah. All right, brother Dickinson, please go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى: إن تولوا فقل حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. وعن أبي الدرداء رضي الله تعالى عنه قال: من قال إذا أصبح وإذا أمسى حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم 7 مرات كفاه الله ما أهمه صادقا كان بها أو كاذبا. وراه Abu Dawud. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the innumerable blessings that He bestows upon us at every instant. Indeed, blessings that no human could possibly enumerate nor take into consideration. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَإِن تُعَدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to try and count any blessing of Allah, indeed no blessing of Allah can be enumerated. The blessings of Allah are more general than to just consider things such as health or well-being, although this is what we should seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that there is nothing more beloved to Allah to be asked for, or nothing is more beloved to Allah that we should beseech Him for than afiyah, which is general well-being. However, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes include the attributes of Jalal, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals His absolute dominance and qahr upon His creation. And in that too, we will find that there is a ni'mah, even if we cannot, at the beginning, always understand or appreciate what the ni'mah and the blessing, the bounty of that manifestation of His power is. So in times like this, many people ask a lot of questions. And sometimes those questions may be well-meaning, but they're kind of futile because it doesn't really make a difference. How did this happen? Where did it start? Why is it happening? Are we being punished? So forth and so on. The real answer to the question should be, as the Prophet ﷺ used to say when things would happen and occur that may not be too favorable, مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ كَانَ وَمَا لَمْ يَشَأْ لَمْ يَكُنْ. That whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed occurred, and whatever Allah had not willed has not occurred. This is a statement that at the outset to some of us may seem to be just very, I don't want to say simplistic, because there's nothing about what the Prophet ﷺ said or did that's simplistic, But for us, it seems like a very pious reaction, right? That as a good Muslim or a believer, we just simply tally everything up to the Mashiach of Allah and we go on about our lives. But there's much more deeper meaning to it, because the deeper one gets into Tawheed and understanding the Wahdaniyah, the uniqueness of Allah, and understanding it not just from the theological, and this is important here, that we've been talking a lot about theology and aqidah. This is the theory, but putting the theory into practice. That when a person's heart recognizes the truth, then it is submissive to the truth, then it has to have a certain madhar, a time and a place where that truth is revealed, where the truth is revealed. So Allah reveals that truth to us in many different forms. Part of it also, obviously, as we say again, as a matter of theology and i'tiqad, that everything is from Allah. Al khair wa shar, things that are good for us or seem good for us or seem to be going our way, or things that may be, again, seemingly against what would be our desires or what we would think is good for us, so forth and so on. All these are statements we know. We've said we've said many times in our life, maybe at a certain point, and we've also discussed it briefly in our classes in etiqad about what these things mean. But however, this is the theoretical to the practical. So when a person has this reality embedded inside of themselves, intellectually, and that meaning also spiritually, and they know what it means, then what is the practical part of it, and what does it mean for people? So that's why I mentioned the statement in the ayah and also in this hadith of Abu Darda radiallahu anhu, that the statement HasbiAllah la ilaha illahu, that Allah is enough for me and there is nobody worthy of worship except Him. So as you know, la ilaha illallah, the meaning of it is that there is no being who has no need for anything, and everything else is in need of Him except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's important why it is connected to the statement Hasbi Allah, that Allah is enough for me. Because every other being, everything that we see around us, as we always say, in a matter of i'tiqad, from an intellectual point of view, from a rational point of view, every being is called contingent being, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only absolute being. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Ghani, has no need of anything or anyone. And He has the attribute of Al-Qiyamu bi nafsi, that He exists by Himself, without the need of anything or anyone else. All of that is very important because these imply things. And when there's an implication, there's always a result, or there's the implication gives us a certain conclusion. And again, we're not just talking about from a theoretical point of view, from a reality point of view, from an experiential point of view, that this is something, as some call, you can have a dhawq, man dhaqa ta'am al-iman, as the hadith says, that whoever tastes iman, like experiences it, not just understanding it from that vantage point, an intellectual point of view, but experiences it. That's the theoretical to the practical. So we say all these things: contingent being, absolute being. Allah is Al-Ghani. Allah is the only being, La ilaha illahu, who needs nothing and everything needs Him. It is Him alone that has that attribute, and it is Him alone who can be described that way. We talked about it many times looking at the world around us, that, these are the realities of things that we see in the creation. Now, what would it mean when implied to that statement, Hasbi Allah? And also, as I said earlier, that when things happen that maybe were discerning to the Prophet ﷺ, then he would say, Ma Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha lam yakun. He would attribute it to the Mashi'a, or the will of Allah. It's because the will of Allah is also synonymous to another term we use, which is irada. These are, by some theologians, it's considered to be one of the necessary attributes of Allah. Again, meaning those attributes which the mind, or the rational mind, must conclude as necessary to any being that we would call God or divine. And amongst them is irada. Why? Because irada denotes will. What does will mean? That along with having qudra and omnipotence to be able to do something, there must be will in order to enact that power. Okay, there must be a will there. It cannot be just, as some people would say, that the creator is almost like it's like this scenario of cause and effect, that everything in the universe has a beginning. There must have been a point where there was a creator, but the creator is no more than that. Like, in other words, the casuality between cause and effect. Now, here again, even outside of Islam, many philosophers have their own take on what's called causation. That as the saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. But that doesn't always have to be, because fire doesn't always have to make smoke. I know that's a very simple example, but the point is that that is not a rule that is necessarily found to be true in every scenario. So what does it prove is that it's not necessarily a universal principle. It's not something we can say is written in stone, that cause and effect is not always the case. I mean, there are certain things that we may not always understand. If a cause and effect is always the case, then the cause should always have an effect, and that's not what we see. That's the bottom line. So we don't look at God as being the cause. Some people I've seen before in a poster a long time ago, someone translated the word al-samad as the uncaused cause of everything that exists, which I thought at that time was very profound, and I kind of, it really kind of hit me, and I never forgot it since that day. And that must have been, it's over more than 15 years ago that I saw that. But as-samad, they translated as the uncaused cause of all things that exist. The thing is, the intent was good, but the problem is even using that word cause with Allah. Okay? Allah is not a cause of something. He is the creator of something. They're two different things. So as-samad actually means a being similar to like the word al-ghani, that needs nothing, but all need him. Another meaning of it also is la jawfa lahu. Then he has no core, or has no if you will, what's the word I want to use here? He has no, he doesn't have there's a word, and I thought about it earlier, now I forgot it, subhanAllah. Anyhow, he doesn't have a hole, if you will, an orifice, all right, which denotes that he doesn't have a body. He's not made, is also another proof that Allah is not made up of parts or as a corporeal or physical body. But anyhow, the point being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the cause, He is the creator. And being the creator, it means that He has to have more than just this attribute of being, that He's the cause, in other words, of everything else, so He has to exist. No. Being the creator means is these other things are implied, that He has irada and will. In order to act out that power that he has, the qudra, then there is irada, the will to enact that qudra. And qudra is related, as we've said many times, the capacity, omnipotence to be able to do ala kulli shayin qadir, as he said, in anything that is plausible, he can do any of those things that are plausible. In the human mind, even if we were trying to think about everything around us, with every single individuated type of existence that we can see and observe, there are so many plausibilities there, it's almost an infinitude. Yet we see things happening in a very measured way. As Allah says, everything here He brings down bimiqdar. They are very specific, and they are measured in very specific ways. That is from qudra too, miqdar, the word miqdar. That all implies that there is a will to do takhsis, to specify something in a way that it can only be that way and no other way. And that's what it means by mashi'a, masha Allah. It was Allah's will. When it is Allah's will, there's certain things to understand for that. First of all, no one can compete with Allah's will. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. You cannot will something yourself unless and until it was the will of Allah. So everything in creation cannot escape this reality. But that's something that's not, again, it's not just from a theological point of view. That is what we have to now, as knowing these things, we have to accept, do tasneem. Okay, we have to do tasneem of it. Now, it also implies that it is within the knowledge of Allah that He had the capacity, the qudra, ala kulli shayin qadir, to do anything of all these possibilities that are there. Something happened exactly the way He wanted it. That was something that happened according to His knowledge. And His knowledge includes, as we've said many times, it's not relegated to confines of the human brain, time, space, and place, and and he is not, for instance, he doesn't have emotions like humans. His sifat are not like ours, so he doesn't do things like we do as human beings, but he does things based on absolute knowledge. What that means and implies, again, just to reiterate all these things, to come back to the original point of why is this from theoretical to practical, it means that the alternatives are also there. Had not we been in this situation, what would life be like? You don't think Allah knows that? Of course He does. So if He chose something to happen, it means that ultimately in His knowledge, that was the best way of things. That was the best way things could have happened, and there's no other alternative that is better. For a believer, what it means is to take that not just intellectually, but apply it in your lives practically. So, how does that happen? The best example for us, of course, is first and foremost, primarily from the lives of the Anbiya, wasalam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said something about Ibrahim alayhi salam, where He said, "Wa Ibrahim alladhi waffa." He mentioned Ibrahim and saying, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, who is one who fulfilled what? They say that he fulfilled بِمُقْتَضَى قَوْلِهِ HasbiAllah, that he had fulfilled completely his statement, which was HasbiAllah, that Allah is enough for me. That Ibrahim alayhi salam obviously knows all these things. Allah has qudra, Allah has ilm, he's omnipotent, and he has knowledge, and his knowledge comprehends all things beyond what any human mind can comprehend, and including the results of every single possibility, and so forth and so on. Ibrahim alayhi salam, of course, knows that. Anbiya alayhi salam know that more than anybody else. So what does it mean that he had fulfilled the demands of his statement? بِمُقْتَضَى قَوْلِهِ حَسْبِيَ اللَّهِ. He had fulfilled the demand of his statement that Allah is enough for me. That when Ibrahim alayhi salam was thrown into the fire, and it is said that Jibreel alayhi salam came and offered his help, his response to him was Hasbi Allah, that Allah is enough for me. What does that imply? It implies that Allah is the one who has brought me in this situation. It is His will that this is what has happened. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who knows my situation. I will submit to it, knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not done any of this except that what He has done is for the best. Even if in my eyes it looks like something else, that it may seem to be, especially if you're about to be thrown in a fire, that this is the end. And it may seem to be that this is something that will be not turn out in my favor. You're not likely to survive being thrown in a fire. Yet, knowing it's from Allah, yet knowing that Allah has knowledge of my situation, I am in need of nothing else and nobody else. Hasbi Allah. Allah is enough for me. Just give me a moment, please. So when he said Hasbi Allah, this is what is implied. Now, what was the result of that? First of all, this is also part of the meaning of what we're told when Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala asked Ibrahim to submit Aslim, and he said, Aslamtu li Rabbil Alameen. This is what it really means. That submit to me, be ready, and submit to whatever happens. And he said, I was ready, I am ready for this. So wafa, he fulfilled all of those things that he was asked to do. But the thing that's important about this is that remember when things like this happen, first of all, this is the first thing that should pop in our mind. Where did all of this come from? It didn't come from a laboratory, it didn't come from a bat, it didn't come from anything else. No matter what the means may or may not have been, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And had Allah so willed, it could have been that it never came into being, or it could have been even worse than it is. There's so many plausibilities. Allah does what He wants. So the fact that He did what He did and it's going on the way it is going on, that's all from Allah and within His knowledge. So instead of getting into useless discussions about, was it a conspiracy, was it not? What's going to happen? What are we going to do? We can't live our life the way that we'd like to. We can't have our Ramadan the way that we would like to. Instead of all that, say, Hasbi Allah. This situation was brought on to us by Allah. and we have nothing else to do but to accept it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in that, one doesn't understand the result of that is that to put the theory into practice, all you know about Allah, His qudra, His ilm, His mashia, His irada. Now when you accept that, you put it into practice by going through these things and then finding out later that in reality, when you have accepted completely, like Ibrahim did, وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ الَّذِي وَفَّى, that when you accept it completely, like Ibrahim alayhi salam did, then you will find the same results that Ibrahim alayhi salam did. Meaning by that, what? Did the fire burn him? No. Matter of fact, the fire became, as we know, bardan wa salaman. It was actually cool and comforting, and it became a means of him finding that coolness and comfort rather than destroying him. So it was the opposite. When he accepted what was in front of him and said, HasbiAllah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him the literal opposite result of what's to be expected. That instead of this being something that would destroy him, it was something that actually made him comfortable and elevated him. Because thereafter, every other type of blessing, كَمَا بَارَكْتَ عَلَىٰ آلِ Ibrahim, as you have blessed the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam, they came to him after this trial. Every other blessing. And the trials, of course, kept on going on in different forms, but every time he was willing to accept these trials as from Allah, and that he was willing to go through with it, then the result was always the opposite. When he was willing to sacrifice his son, the result was opposite. Not only was his son's life spared, but he was also given the same barakah and blessing, is that he was the father of a nation of people who would then later on bring about the last and the best of all of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? That was the blessing. That was the things that were given to him. Those were amongst the blessings that were given to him and his family after being able to look at their situations and submit wholeheartedly. Aslamtu li Rabbil Alameen. Right? And say, HasbiAllah. Allah is enough for me. Whatever the situation that I may be in at first may not look to my advantage. But if we know it's from Allah, then we should know that it is for the best, and we should even embrace it. Not meaning to go out and, of course, put yourself into situations, right? You should obviously follow the guidelines that we're asked to and be careful. But meaning, instead of becoming depressed or upset or thinking to ourselves that the world would be a better place without it, perhaps, maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's some good in all of this that we are yet to see, that if we just submit ourselves to the situation and give ourselves that room to trust in Allah as we should, HasbiAllah wa ni'mal wakeel, then we will find in it great good. Ibn Atallah rahimahullah ta'ala has a statement where he said, مَا نَفَعَ الْقَلْبَ مِثْلُ عُزْدَةٍ يَدْخُلُ بِهَا مَيْدَانَ فِكْرَةٍ, which is very poetic, hard to translate as poetically as he put it. But the essence of it is there is nothing quite like being removed from people, like social distancing. There's nothing quite like it in its effectiveness in benefiting the heart so that it can roam freely in the field of contemplation. Okay? مَا نَفَعَ قَلْبَ مِثْلُ عُزْدَةٍ يَدْخُلُ بِهَا مَيْدَانَ فِكْرَةٍ, which again is I roughly translated, there was a rough translation, that there is nothing quite like being removed from people, like social distancing, in its effectiveness and benefiting, giving its effectiveness to the heart so that it can roam freely through the field of contemplation. Because tafakkur, as it's used in the Quran, and fikrah is exactly what we try to do when we discuss these things in our Aqidah classes. Like we try to give certain principles from a rational point of view, the way we should look at the creation around us. But the most effective way of bringing those things from theory to practice is when a person is removed from their distractions. The distraction mainly being here, khalq, other people, right? And all of the normal life that we supposedly were living, and Allah only knows how normal our lives really were, right? But there's normalcy is debatable, whether our postmodern life was normal to any extent. It's funny how now people are complaining about not being able to do things that they weren't even doing from before. We were already doing social distancing to a certain extent, being so engrossed in our own personal lives and in, using social media instead of real life experiences. And now all of a sudden everyone has the need now to go crazy and bonkers when really we have everything we have, right? Most of us have, mashallah. In this case, I've been blessed to have a yard at least. And I can still go out, enjoy the sunlight, enjoy the fresh air. We have so many things with it. We have our families. What more do you need? Going back to Ibrahim alayhi salam, who did he have? He had Allah. And with Allah only, he had a few people with him, mainly his family. And that was enough for him. He didn't need more. And through those that small group of people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an everlasting change throughout the entire world. That is the example that we're supposed to follow. Think about all that in our own context. Where we're in this situation, it may be difficult in some ways, but perhaps Allah has opened a door in other ways. And one of these is this, that now you have the time to do this type of tafakkur, to take all of these things you may have learned before and look at it, or look around you. Take a glance outside for a second and think about all of these things, and then learn about how our nafs and shaitan tricks us into never pondering over or thinking about the things that have been put in front of us in a way that's meaningful, and we draw conclusions in a way that we are exactly like Ibrahim alayhi salam. We know that everything is from Allah, and we know that Allah is never going to put their servant who submits to him, right, in any type of bad situation. Even in the beginning, it may look like it is something that is potentially dangerous or potentially going to hurt them or potentially going to destroy them. But the reality is, when submitting to Allah and believing Allah, no situation is there to destroy you. It is only there to make you better and only to bring about something better, even if you don't see it in the beginning. Just like in every case of Ibrahim alayhi salam, every trial that he went through, فَأَتَمَّهُنْ, and completely successfully passed those trials. وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ الَّذِي وَفَّى, then indeed Allah was enough for him, that he raised him and his whole progeny, كَمَا بَرَكْتَ عَلَىٰ آلِ Ibrahim, in ways that no human being would ever be able to imagine. This could be our chance too. So yeah, we're missing out possibly in Ramadan and our iftar parties. We're missing out possibly in praying in Taraweeh. We're missing out on so many things. But we should also ask ourselves and review all of this and think to ourselves that how much of this really was the essence of the spirit of Ramadan. You have to remember that when the commandment, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ, when the commandment of Sawm and fasting was given to many of the Sahaba, there were incidents like, for instance, the Battle of Badr took place in the month of Ramadan. Okay, they weren't necessarily hanging out having iftar parties. Okay, they were involved in this case in a literal battle. Okay, they were, not their Ramadan was not the same as what we do now. That doesn't mean that we don't enjoy or like having iftar parties and getting together and being sociable. The Muslims are for the most part very sociable people. And from a cultural perspective, every Muslim culture has this aspect. So it's going to be hard to not feel that this year if that's the case. But we have to remember, again, the true spirit of fasting was not necessarily like that for the Sahaba. Salatul Taraweeh was not even established really as a sunnah until after the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? Now that means that, people were individually worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the nighttime during the month of Ramadan. Ubay bin Ka'b anhu was the first who was ordered by Umar anhu to gather the people behind him and make one imam and then make Salatul Taraweeh. And no, that is not a bid'ah, because number one, the Prophet himself ﷺ told us to follow those khulafa. عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي. So we were commanded to follow them. So that includes it amongst the sunnah, because the Prophet told us to follow them, and also because all of the Sahaba as a group were there to witness it and no one objected, which also makes it ijma'. So there's no doubt that that's part of our deen. But the point being is that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and even all the way up into the Khilafah of Umar anhu, no one was worshipping in that particular manner, meaning all together with one imam and the Salat al-Tarawih that we're used to praying in our masajid. So it shouldn't necessarily, as heart lifting, as heartwarming as it is to participate in such things, but it is not necessary, especially from the point of view of even in Sharia. There is no scholars that I know of that say it is anything more than a sunnah. It's an emphasized sunnah, no doubt, but it is no more than a sunnah. And if there is a reason, a person can pray it on their own, so that you won't even miss out on it from that perspective. If your heart feels so right, uh, aches because you feel that this won't be an opportunity this year, but you have to know that you can do it on your own. And why not? Even better. If you can't make it to the masjid because of now we cannot run, because of these reasons, then at least do it on your own. Sometimes, again, there is nothing better or more beneficial. There is nothing more beneficial for the heart at times to be away from people, and especially in terms of things like riyah and to show off, right, and do things for other than Allah. Well, now, there's no question of that. There's nobody else around to watch you, right? So these are all, if you think about it from that perspective, that is an opportunity. It's time to open up these doors and think about the opportunities that will come. Yes, and also to question ourselves that how much of our deen, perhaps a reason that we find a lot of these troubles, a lot of our deen has become, as you say in Urdu, riwaj. They're just customs and habits rather than actually deep understanding of what the deen is and what our aqidah is and what is demanded by us from Allah. As an example, I'll give you, is related to Taraweeh as well. That I never forget when I served as an Imam in Long Island, Masjid Noor. There was the Khatam night of Salat al-Taraweeh. We had so many people came and were expected to come that they built an extension to the masjid. Literally, like part of it into the parking lot, they had built another room, a makeshift kind of like quick, like almost tent-like structure, so people could fit for the Khatam or the finishing of the Quran that night. So it occurred to me that we have never had a crowd that big during Salat al-Jum'ah. And from a very technical point of view, Salat al-Jum'ah is fard. And Salat al-Taraweeh and even the Khatam of Quran and Taraweeh is a sunnah, no more, no less. So they're not the same. Yet we have more people in the masjid for the Khatam in Ramadan than we do for Jum'ah. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is we're not worshipping Allah the way He should be worshipped based on the Sharia. We're worshipping Allah based on our own emotions. Think about that for a second. Like, we become emotional about things. So perhaps the reason why we're missing Salat al-Taraweeh in the masjid is not really per se because of Salat al-Taraweeh. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just an emotional attachment. And our deen is not that. Our deen is sami'na wa ta'ana. It is to follow the commandment, as Ibrahim alayhi salam in his case always submitted to whatever was brought in front of him. And in that you will find khair. Bi-idhnillah, all of those things will be given back to us. But perhaps it was the reason why this even happened. Is this part of the things that we should be asking? Is that maybe we weren't really concentrating enough on what was important. It's in that vein, it's good to remember that Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he wrote Ihya Ulum ad-Din, the Muslim world was having plenty of its own troubles. The Crusades were there. There was also the Qaramita, talking about the Hajj. They had ransacked the Kaaba and they had prevented the Hujjaj coming for, I forget how many years, but it was in the years. It wasn't just a couple, it was like it went on for some time. Not only did they do that, they actually took the black stone away from the Kaaba. They stole it. It was retrieved eventually and brought back. All this was happening in and around the time of Imam al-Ghazali. If all of us are complaining now about this, a few months, maybe not. We don't know yet whether Hajj will completely be. And by the way, the Haramain is not completely blocked off. It's limited, okay? And so it's nothing near that kind of situation. Yet Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala took a look at all of this. And when he started his book, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, the revival of Islamic sciences, the first thing that he noted was that the issue is not really any of these events. The issue is that Muslims, as I mentioned before, have made their deen customary, a riwaj. And they don't really understand the true purport and spirit of deen. So there has to be a revival of this Islamic knowledge in the hearts and the minds of the Muslims, so that they understand what they're doing, not just as a custom or a practice, but they understand what they're doing as a reality. And that reality can fit in any particular situation. When the reality is there, then Allah may bring back to us all those things that we have lost, and even better. Meaning, hopefully, with a renewed spirit and vigor, we will have more ikhlas, and then we would not do these things just as a custom, but we will actually benefit from why these things have already been put there anyhow, which is the dhikr of Allah. It is all of this. It is to remember that this is not from a theological point of view alone, it's practical. When you put it into practice in opportunities like this, meet it head on and submit to Allah and say, HasbiAllah, then the result is just like as Ibrahim alayhi salam, he did his part, Ibrahim alladhi wafa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did his part, which no person could imagine. The gifts and the blessings and the barakah, kama barakta ala ali Ibrahim, that was given to him. None of us could ever plan or plot or think like that. None of the politicians of the world today or any of these organizations, and definitely not them, could ever, right, imagine what Allah brought out of that kind of situation. But that only happens when a person is not just talking about these things, but enacts these things. So we have to first of all put it into our hearts and minds. It's enough of the why and oh, woe is me, or feeling sorry for ourselves, but saying no, it's from Allah. HasbiAllah. Allah is enough in His knowledge, enough in His Mashiach that this has happened. So there will be something that comes out of this that for sure that will be better for everyone. I don't want to get into the politics part, but even to a certain degree, there is some hadith and there are some books actually written by a modern scholar, Abu Bakr al-Adani in Yemen, about the signs of the last days, where he does a really good job in kind of categorizing all these hadith in chronological order to understand how certain events might unfold in the last days. He mentioned something interesting. He actually talked about certain hadith implicating the New World Order, but he also said that after that, it will be called a Marhamatul Saylama, which is the end of the New World Order. Okay. And for sure, Allahu Adam, we can see that's kind of happening if any of you are paying attention for this whole event. And to me, my personal stance on it, and this has nothing to do with Aqeedah or anything else, is good riddance. I don't mind that. With all of the things that are the so-called perks of a global economy, and it was all the jolly type of thing. It was, there's a lot of other implications behind that were very negative, completely negative. So we are at a new epoch. After this, yes, life will be different, and you don't know, it might be better for all of us. And again, for me, from a personal point of view, just personal point of view, if we don't have to do anything with China, alhamdulillah. Sorry to say it. I don't, mashallah. Whatever happens, happens. But if that's the case, alhamdulillah. Everyone should be wary of certain ideologies. Right? Certain ideologies are not, there's levels of kufr. And not every type of kufr is the same in its level of hatred towards Iman and spirituality as others. And again, I don't want to get into politics too much, but communism, just doesn't fit, no offense. So whatever happens there, Allah only knows. But again, it's just to get us to think that through all of it, we don't know. The outcome will always be better. Allah Ta'ala will make it better for us if we submit, if we try. And about adjusting our ibadah, that's also there in the Sharia. This is why I try to kind of, give some encouragement for that also as well, that we take the opportunity to relearn all these things and really understand the differences between the fara'id and the sunnah and the nawafil, because all the things that we usually think are necessary for Ramadan, iftar parties and salat al-tarawih in the masjid, that's not what's necessary. So learn what is necessary and learn what is the spirit. It is kind of funny because this whole thing is related to, the reformation of the self. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That Siyam is an obligation upon you as it was obligated upon people before you, so that perhaps you develop taqwa. Taqwa has nothing to do with the in-out external, to the point that taqwa cannot be quantified. There can be people who maybe don't do much from an ibadah point of view, but the taqwa that they have in their hearts is of a higher level. So taqwa, again, وَأَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Allah alone is the one who knows who actually has that type of taqwa or not. It's not quantifiable with us per se. It is only known by Allah. So that means it's an internal quality. So what does it mean here? لَعَلَّكُمْ also, as I said before, in other classes, لَعَلَّ means for some, when Allah says that so perhaps, it means that it is waqia, that will be the result. i.e., if you fast, you fulfill this obligation with ikhlas, with sincerity, the result would be taqwa. The result would be this internal quality. Okay? Now, the internal quality is a spiritual quality. Part of the things that develop spirituality, they say that, for instance, in other works and in many other, you know, shuyukh have said the same thing. One of the things that will destroy a person spiritually is what they call shahil ta'am. In English, they call it gluttony. It is the lust and desire of food that, you know, the Prophet ﷺ himself said that is, you know, excuse me, ما ملأ وعاء أشر من بطني, that the human being has not filled any vessel with more evil than they have their own stomach. Shar is not just evil, it's harm, by the way, which you even take it from a medical perspective. That's a whole nother issue. Part of this has to do with that too. Not saying that the virus is not deadly or that it shouldn't be taken seriously, but it is going to definitely be more harmful to people who have weaker immune systems and other health problems. So that all starts really, in reality, this is, and not to offend anyone out there who's in the medical profession, this is part of the problem I have with our own healthcare system, is they never focus on the real causes. They only tackle the problem when it's already there. Now you have cancer, let's deal with it. Well, how could we prevented the cancer from the first place? And that's what the Prophet himself said, that the root of all your ailments is your stomach. So in essence, even spiritually and physically, you fill no vessel, right? There's nothing you can do more harm to yourself than what you do to your stomach, meaning what you fill your stomach with, from a physical perspective and from a spiritual perspective. So think about that for a second. Iftar parties are fine. How much food do we waste? How much do we love to eat and what we eat? Maybe now time is a time to think about that in this Ramadan. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions usually broke their fast with two simple things: dates and water. And they weren't really eating all that much to begin with. So even after the Salah, after Maghrib, and when they ate dinner, it wasn't like they were having the full course meals and more that we were having, full of fried food. I mean, we have to start thinking about these things. Even from a physical point of medical point of view, the most important thing you have right now is your immune system. Start thinking about eating better foods, right? Being, you know, more, we often see that many people in our community really don't care about that. And it's a sign. That's why I said, shahil ta'am, when you are gluttonous, even in this society, we have such a problem with things like diabetes and obesity that just adds to the fear of this whole thing. Right? It just adds to the problem. So, you know, we have to think about that it is a sign, outward sign of a spiritual sickness, that when we are gluttonous and we don't care about what we eat or how we eat or how much we eat. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Hasbi bin Adam, after he said that this statement that you can fill your nothing more, no vessel with more harm than you do your own stomach. He said, it is enough for you to eat whatever will whatever will straighten your back, which is, of course, a metaphorical way of saying that whatever will give you health. That is the purpose of eating. In other words, what the purpose of your food is to make you healthy. The purpose of your food is to give your body the health that it needs, to be the vehicle that it is to carry you from point A to point B, which is your final destination, without any serious problems. Serious problems means things like this, obviously, coronavirus or whatever, COVID-19 or whatever else. Now, you know, that's why it's interesting, even in the dua that the Prophet ﷺ made to be protected from Sayyil Asqam, which are the most vicious and harmful diseases. Some of the ulama said that he did not seek refuge from being sick, because in being sick, there is benefit for us in the kafara, and that it removes our sins and raises our daraja. So just having a headache or having a fever or, you know, these kinds of things are actually good for us if we're patient with them. When we mean Sayyil Asqam are, of course, things like this, deadly diseases. These are diseases that will destroy you and put you in a situation where, you know, Allah forbid, stuff like this, where you're not conscious. where you have to be put on a ventilator. I don't think anyone in their right mind would want to do that. Even if it was, first of all, the chances of survival are almost nil. I mean, very low, not nil, but very low. And it's painful. And if you're not conscious and you're not in the right state of mind, this is why the Prophet ﷺ also taught us this, to seek refuge, as I mentioned before, and other ways of dying, like drowning and being burned alive. Even if a person dies that way, is attains shahada, the reason is that the shock and the excruciating pain of those events may take us out of our minds, where we're not able to remember Allah, where we're not able to concentrate or be conscious, and that is a very dangerous state to die in. So we don't want that, right? We make dua from that to be prevented from dying in those manners, and may Allah accept, may Allah protect us. But the idea is there that, okay, you may get sick every once in a while. There's benefit in that, but not a harsh or disease of that nature. And anyhow, back to the original point again, which is the food part. So rethink these things, your iftar parties and what we do. Perhaps that's not really the spirit of Islam. Now, we're not saying that you can't have it or you can't do it. Interestingly enough, Al-Alamat al-Sarakhsi, rahimahullah ta'ala, is a great usuli, who was a great faqih, the Hanafi fiqh. He has an explanation of Imam Muhammad's book, which is a book of basically earning, which is a book he wrote to delineate what is the necessity of a person of earning a livelihood and how much of it they should earn. In that book, he makes a point that overeating, yes, generally is not welcomed and is looked down and frowned upon, except in certain situations. And one of them, he said, in Ramadan, but if it's the intention is to give yourself more strength to worship Allah, not to kind of make up for what you didn't eat throughout the day, right? Two different things. But so there's some room there. I'm not saying don't have them or don't eat well in Ramadan, but rethink it, because that's not what Ramadan is about, right? And rethink it for both spiritual, because shahwa ta'am, gluttony, is a spiritual disease, which they say is the most dangerous. Like Imam Qadi Iyad rahimahullah said, of all the necessities of man, which he categorized in three parts, the one necessity of man that if you overindulge it, it is harmful for you from a spiritual point of view, it is food. It's food. Gluttony also, by the way, just to prove that this is something that all of the prophets taught, is that this is also considered in the Old Testament in the Bible to be considered one of the deadly and destructive sins. Gluttony. So again, is Ramadan the time to be gluttonous? Absolutely not. That's not how you develop taqwa. And even from the point of Salatul Taraweeh, it is a sunnah, right? It's not more than that. Our other salats and other salawat are fard. They are more important. And they have more, why isn't we are not in the masjid in those times, but we're there in Salatul Taraweeh? I know people have schedules and have to work, but these are valid questions. So maybe this is time to rethink all these things. Not being able to do what we normally do and being away from people opens up this door. As Ibn Ata'Allah, the quote I gave to you, rahimahullah, said, it opens up, he literally said, the field, Maidan. Why did he use that example, that poetic language? Because when animals are let out in a field to graze, they go from place to place. They roam around freely. And they're able to use that time and that space to just basically go anywhere they want. So the same thing is there when you have no distraction. Your mind now can go anywhere it wants. Hopefully, it'll be used in a good way. Instead of fear, panic, that is the exact opposite. HasbiAllah. This is from Allah. So Allah will bring something great out of this. Allah will bring something beneficial out of this. Allah will take care of me. I don't have to worry about that. Ya Jibreel, that's why Ibrahim alayhi said it at that point when he's being thrown in the fire. I don't need you. This is what is going on. Allah is actually showing his creation that look at man that you said you didn't know why I created. Look at him. That he has told you, I don't need you. Allah is enough for me. He knows, he put me in the situation, and look what the result was. The result was always good, not just good, better. Meaning it only elevated him from one position to another. So we should, inshallah, end here. If there's any questions, you can ask, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Brother Dickinson, for wonderful lecture. Anyone has any question, please type in the chat window. I'm going to unmute everyone so you get the chance to speak up and ask question as well. So I'm going to do that in a second. Okay, you guys are unmuted, and if you are not going to ask any question, please mute yourself, and you can ask question as well. So no one has any questions? Yeah, Brother Dickinson, looks like no one has any question. It was a wonderful lecture. Thank you so much. I
Alhamdulillah.
appreciate. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to end the meeting and I'll share the recording. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you.
Great lecture. Thank you.